However, I'm afraid this is not seen as good news for Crystal Palace because they have lost their CAS appeal. They will play in the Europa Conference League this season. UEFA are expected to now confirm that Nottingham Forest will take their place in the Europa League. Palace will now, of course, consider their legal options. Right, we've got our chief reporter, Kaveh Solokal, on set for this. Big story for Crystal Palace. Not good news. What more can you tell us about it?
Well, look, it's terrible news for Crystal Palace fans because just 3 months ago, they won the FA Cup at Wembley by beating Manchester City. And the prize for winning the FA Cup is a place in the Europa League. That is a place that they earn. But of course, the problem is that they've fallen foul of UEFA's controversial multi-club ownership rules. And UEFA said that John Textor, the American businessman, had shares in Crystal Palace and he's also got shares in Lyon. Both these clubs have qualified for the Europa League, and UEFA said we can't have a situation where both these clubs are going to play in the Europa League. So they removed Crystal Palace and put Palace in the Conference League instead. Now, Palace appealed to the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Lausanne. There was a 10-hour hearing in Switzerland on Friday. I was there. Steve Parish, the Palace chairman, was there. In the morning, I think he was quietly confident that maybe they'd get a fair hearing at CAS and they'd get their place in the Europa League back. But obviously, we've just had the news that Palace have lost their appeal. CAS have decided that rules are rules. John Textor owned shares in Lyon and he also owned shares in Crystal Palace. He had until March the 1st to do something about it. If he'd placed his Palace shares in a blind trust by March the 1st, then Palace would still have their place in the Europa League. He didn't do that for whatever reason. And guess what? He's not involved at Crystal Palace anymore either, because he's sold his shares in Crystal Palace to another American businessman, Woody Johnson. So you've got this incredible situation where Crystal Palace, who absolutely definitively are not part of a multi-club ownership group, have been banned from playing in the Europa League by UEFA, and their place will probably be taken by Nottingham Forest. Of course, bad news for Palace fans, great news for Forest fans. And I think what Nottingham Forest will be saying is rules are rules. It's written there in black and white. Crystal Palace have broken UEFA's multi-club ownership rules. They had until March the 1st to do something about it. They didn't do something about it. We finished above them in the Premier League. We finished 7th, they finished 12th. So really, really sorry. Bad news for Palace fans, but we are now going to be playing in the Europa League. We just have to wait for confirmation from UEFA about that.
When you said there that they had till March the 1st to do something about it, it sounded like they had till March the 1st to sort of get around these rules rather than actually do something definitively about it. Is that fair? But what's the situation with Nottingham Forest? Because they're multi-club as well, aren't they?
Well, the Nottingham Forest owner, Mr. Evangelos Marinakis. Now, Nottingham Forest saw this coming because if you go back to towards the end of last season, when it looked like a possibility that Nottingham Forest could be in the Champions League and Olympiacos were going to be in the Champions League, Mr. Marinakis acted to make sure that his shares in Nottingham Forest were placed in a blind trust. And they did everything by the book, according to UEFA's rules. As it happened, Nottingham Forest didn't get into the Champions League, so there wasn't that issue. But I think if you're looking at this from Crystal Palace's point of view, it is an administrative error that they are being punished for. Because what are UEFA saying? UEFA are saying we have to have a situation in the Europa League where the integrity of the competition cannot be at risk because two clubs playing in it have the same owner who maybe could fix results or do something underhand. But there is no connection now between Lyon and Crystal Palace at all, because John Textor has sold his shares in Crystal Palace. But UEFA have decided to go down this road. They've decided to punish Crystal Palace for basically punishing an administrative error. And Crystal Palace fans will be very, very angry about this. we already know how angry they are. We've had this situation where multi-club owned groups, teams like Manchester City and Girona last season, they played in the Champions League. We had the situation where Manchester United and Nice both played in the Europa League. We had the situation in 2018 where Red Bull Salzburg and RB Leipzig, not only did they play in the same Europa League, they were in the same group. They played each other home and away, two Red Bull teams. So all these people, it was fine. UEFA allowed them to use this legal loophole to get around their rules. But because Crystal Palace missed the deadline to use this legal loophole, they are being punished. And they have to play in the third-tier Conference League instead of the Europa League, which they qualified for by winning the FA Cup. And I think this is very damaging for the FA Cup as well. A lot of people think that the reward for winning the FA Cup should be a place in the Champions League. This season, the reward for winning the FA Cup has been a place in the third-tier Conference League. And I don't think this is the end of the road, by the way. I think Crystal Palace, OK, I think they're tired. They've had enough of this. This has been going on for 3 months. There has to come a point where they say, look, we've just got to put it behind us. We've got to get on with life. We have to accept this decision. I think that's what they're going to do. But I still think their lawyers are going to be looking at this decision, because I think there are going to be some lawsuits which are going to be issued in the next few weeks and months. Because, yes, Crystal Palace are going to play in the Conference League, but I think they may have some pretty sort of strong claims for compensation from quite a few different people and maybe UEFA as well. Yeah,
Crystal Palace fans have done nothing wrong. This is very disappointing news for them because, like we said, done nothing wrong. The players have done nothing wrong. Charlie Austin, if you're in that Crystal Palace dressing room, you earned the right. You won the FA Cup, an amazing moment. And as Carvey says, the reward is a place in the Europa League. How will they be feeling now?
Disappointed, they'll be gutted that everything that they've done on the pitch that they're in control of. Everybody knows, like Carval said, you win the FA Cup, you're in the Europa League. That is the prize at the end of it. They've done what they have. They can't affect what goes on off the pitch. So there's been an error. Just they haven't got in time in the deadline. So they'll be disappointed. They'll be gutted. All them kind of words. But the thing is now, the biggest thing, like you said, Carl, is you need to draw the line in the sand for the players. But the hard bit's going for it is now. It's the next 3 weeks. What players are now going to go Europa Conference League? I don't really want to know if I want to play in that. Europa League's a little bit different. And as much as you can say that it's like a 3-tier system, the gap between the Champions League and the Europa League is massive. And the gap between the Europa League and the Europa Conference League is massive. So that will play a part for me. That will play a part in them attracting players, but also trying to keep hold of their 2 best players.
Yeah, Carvey, very quickly, I can't really get this whole March the 1st deadline thing. It doesn't really seem right to me. It's like, these are the rules. When you keep saying rules are rules, rules are rules, but you can't get round them this way. It seems like there's a bit of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Is that fair? Should that be changed?
The big clubs who are part of multi-club ownership groups are prepared for this, so they know the rules. They're part of the European Club Association. They get legal advice on the legal loopholes they can use to get around these rules. But if you go back to March the 1st, Crystal Palace had no idea that they were going to win the FA Cup. I think around the time of the deadline, they were playing Millwall in the FA Cup. It was beyond their wildest dreams that they would win the FA Cup. Crystal Palace have never won a major trophy in their history. And also, John Textor was trying to sell his shares in Crystal Palace. One of the reasons he didn't want to put his shares in a blind trust is if he'd put them in a blind trust, then he would have lost control of the process of selling his shares. He's sold his shares. He's no longer involved in Crystal Palace at all. So I think, I mean, part of me thinks, what are UEFA doing? I sit here, I always try and defend UEFA, FIFA, see things from their point of view as well. It's very, very easy just to be negative about FIFA, be negative about UEFA the whole time. But part of me just thinks, this is a great story. Crystal Palace, going from nowhere, never having won a trophy in their whole history, winning the FA Cup, qualifying for the Europa League. UEFA should be embracing that story. They should want to be part of that story. It would be a great storyline for Crystal Palace to play in the Europa League. Yet what have they done? They've dragged Crystal Palace kicking and screaming through the courts and punished them for an administrative error. Having said that, I've got to say, from Nottingham Forest's point of view, they've done nothing wrong. The rules are the rules. Nottingham Forest will say it's there in black and white. Everybody else abided by the rules. Crystal Palace should have done it as well. We're going to play in the Europa League. Great news for us.